From the headquarters of MedianReport in Riga, Latvia, please welcome your host, Chris Peterson.
Baltic Roundtable of Economists, conversation on why Baltic businesses are shy to brag, and will the AI kill intellectual property rights as once video killed the radio star, plus an exclusive opening interview with Financial Times chief commentator Martin Wolf. Welcome to this week's MedianReport. We'll talk. Yes, our second attempt to launch a show. How many times Elon Musk failed with his SpaceX rockets? I hope we will stop at the second try and learn from mistakes last year. For those who don't know, this is a completely new economics, business, and finance show. You can call it a podcast if you like, or a TV program. Its title is MedianReport, and I'm your host, Chris Peterson. I sit in my studio headquarters here in Riga, in Latvia, but I'm in Tallinn and Vilnius as much as I'm here, so you can surely call me a true Baltic citizen. Why Baltics? Well, for some time, and since Russia's aggressive war in Ukraine even more, I'm convinced that although we are competing to each other on a daily basis, we have nothing to split when it comes to common investment area, defense and security policies, capital markets, and the access to financing, as well as policies around circular economy, talent pools, and so on. Yes, we don't speak one language, and that's why this show will be in English. No, I'm not for European federalization and also for one united Baltic states, although we may play around this idea with some of our guests time to time. Get comfortable and ready to spend 1 hour each Friday evening, or during weekend if you like, with MedianReport. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, and very soon on different business and economics news platforms in Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. You can reach me via email, which I'll leave down in the episode notes. Otherwise, we are ready to start the marathon of 40 episodes in the season, which will end just before the midsummer festivities next year. You know how it is with a brand new show. You want to open up with a big bang, with big interviews and shiny studio. But my exclusive online sit-down with Financial Times Martin Wolf happened in a car in a rainy day with my phone ringing non-stop. Nevertheless, I focused all my energy with all my 30-plus years of experience in journalism, and I carried through the interview as professionally as I could. That's a little side note. The world is not a fun place to be right now, not if you understand how macroeconomics work, what's the geopolitical situation around us, and if you know who's in charge of the most important economy in the world. I wanted this show to start with something a little bit optimistic, but Martin, as you will hear, won't allow us to party very hard. We'll leave that to the second part of the show.
So, dear Martin, thank you for joining MedianReport, the first and opening interview of the new season. Thank you for being here.
Pleasure.
I have prepared questions to you like we would have like 3-hour conversation, but I'll try to do my best to filter out the most important ones. And let's start maybe with a global important topic. You have argued that liberal democracy depend on trust and institutional credibility. How do you think now, given the rising trend of populism and protectionism and economic nationalism, do you see that the global capitalism is entering like a more dangerous phase?
I think we are in a period of profound transformation, and it's centered on the United States because it's the most important country and it's changing fastest, both in its domestic politics and polity and in its international politics and policy. So, but it's not just the US, of course. We see echoes of this across the entire world in democratic societies. And meanwhile, we see clearly a rising confidence of autocracies. You see this very clearly in the recent summit in Beijing between China, India, Russia, and many other countries. So this is a transformative moment. And the underlying key point about this clearly is that a very large proportion of the electorate, in the US, close to half of the electorate, has lost confidence in, if you like, the established institutions and established elites in politics, in government, and to a significant extent also in business. And they increasingly support outsiders who have transformative ambitions for their countries and international system. And one of the consequences, you just touched on that, is that the global capitalism, the globalism as it's called, so the global capitalism was in an even wider framework that people believed in, particularly after the end of the Cold War, which is, after all, only 35 years ago, is now under attack. And the most obvious sign of this, of course, is the Trump administration's radical transformation of the world trading system and complete upending of the world trading system in the last 8 months.
So it means not only capitalism, it's democracy, it's all that we hold very dear here in the Western culture and world.
Yes, I think, I'm writing at the moment an updating chapter for a second edition of my book. I'm not revising it all, on the crisis of democratic capitalism. I've been looking now very closely at what's happened in the United States. And I think particularly, I think things like this could happen in European countries. If governments like this came into power, I think it'll be more difficult, but it's possible. But in America, it's very, very clear that the administration is following an absolutely standard path, if you like, a guidebook towards replacing a democracy with a dictatorship. There's no other word for it. And they have made extraordinary progress. Of course, given that this is the US, it's extraordinary. Of course, they haven't subverted every aspect of the system in any way, but they have transformed the way the government works. They have advanced principles of presidential power, which are extremely radical and which are clearly accepted within the administration. And to a significant extent, though not entirely by the legal system, Congress is supine. Much of business has, as it were, kissed the ring and supported it and completely accepted it because they feel they have no alternative. And to a very substantial extent, this government, this administration rules by decree. The legal process has been largely bypassed. They don't even seem to feel they have to spend the money that Congress has authorized and appropriated. So the decision of what the government does, how it does it, where it does it from a day-to-day basis is made by the president and his team. And the tariff process, again, just is so revelatory because it seems pretty clear that, certainly in international law, but even in domestic law, it's increasingly argued, and the courts have decided so far that the president isn't legally entitled to do what he's been doing, which are massive increases in taxation, which are supposed to be, after all, congressional function. But we will see what the Supreme Court decides on that very big matter. But the shift is clearly very radical. I think a crucial element is that they have quite obviously seized control of key elements of what the Russians would call the power ministries. They control the army, the Department of Justice, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the intelligence services, the tax system. These are all incredibly powerful systems of coercion, and you can see this with the glad willingness, as it were, to put the army, essentially, and the National Guard into cities which Mr. Trump thinks are not properly governed. So that's, I think, what we're seeing.
And in this context, how do you see Fed's independence surviving in this climate of politicized monetary policy?
I find it very difficult to imagine it's going to survive. I would imagine, since the Jay Powell is going to be replaced quite soon, even if he doesn't get rid of the people now, we'll see what happens with Lisa Cook. But the chair will be a Trump appointee, and he or she, well, it seems pretty likely to be, he will be appointed to obey what the president says. And will the Fed chair be able to get whatever he wants? There will be some resistance, probably, and he might not be completely controllable. People can sometimes be unpredictable, but I would expect that they will get a Fed that is supine. And we know that the president wants the monetary policy to support the economy and make it easier to fund the fiscal deficit. And that's what we call fiscal dominance. Technically, in economics, it's a monetary system designed to function, to make an out of balance macroeconomic policy work for a while. And to me, I'm afraid this looks like Argentina.
Okay, enough with US. Let's jump to EU, to Europe. Very recent events, Rimini speech, Mario Draghi, he delivered very blunt message about pragmatic Europeanism, shared debt, shared strategy, shared defense costs. Do you think this can work? Are we ready for something like that?
I think this is for a European, and I consider myself very much European, even though I'm in a country that left the EU very much against my desire. An example of this sort of populism, Brexit and the election of Trump in 2016 were what started me on writing this book, because it seemed such a watershed moment. So the answer is, if you like, this is sort of, the way I think of it is irresistible force and immovable object, if you like, in the future of Europe. The forces in the world today sort of compel Europe to integrate more and act more together. On their own, the member states are, let's be quite clear, they're small countries. They're not really small countries, but compared to the giants of the world today, they're small countries. Their ability to exert leverage on the world, even a country like Germany, is relatively limited. It is not and never will be a superpower. And that means in this world, which is not just the US, but also China and a threatening Russia, not a great power, but a very substantial military power. Also India rising, not yet a threat in force, but also rising, also colossal. The realities of the situation make it necessary to act together in all the areas Mario Draghi mentioned. Mario Draghi is always very sensible. He's a dear friend. I've known him for more than 30 years, really well, since he was in the Treasury in Italy. What he says is always sensible. He was a great president of the ECB. So there's the irresistible force. The immovable object is nationalism, which is still, of course, strong. Europe is, because of its history, I don't need to go into that, its cultural history and as well as its political history, it's fundamentally divided. People feel that they are first and foremost German, French, Italian, Spanish, or even Catalan. And this is a continent of division, profound division. And this goes back a very, very long time. Think about the breakup of the Catholic Europe 500 years ago or so, well, almost exactly 500 years ago. Division is natural. When they were given the option to create a genuine political union by Helmut Kohl, a great man in the early 90s at the time of the Maastricht Treaty, the French said no. I thought then and think now a terrible mistake. It was the opportunity. So that's the immovable object. And it's getting worse because of course, the same populist forces that we described, which are essentially nationalist in large part, not protectionist in the same degree as in America. They know that's not realistic, but nationalists will make these forces stronger. But I'm a bit encouraged with Ms. Maloney. I've been surprised how pragmatic she's been. But I would say irresistible force, immovable object. I mean, my view at the moment, I don't know which will win, but I fear it will be the latter. That in the end, Europeans will not be able to act to make the heroic leaps that will be necessary to make Europe truly more integrated. And the starting point would have to be a much substantially increased European fiscal capacity, with European capacity to fund defense, operate together, build European defense industry that really works, and to act together in foreign policy too. Will that be possible? I hope so, but I doubt it.
Are you worried about what's happening now in France? Could it echo around the Eurozone and further?
Yes, I mean, the state of France is particularly worrying. I mean, to be honest, truth, all the major member states of Europe look pretty frightening in different ways. But France looks the most unstable at the moment. I mean, friends of mine, I followed France all my life, of course. I can even remember when de Gaulle came into power in the early 60s, and that was a civil war. I mean, France was on the brink of a civil war. So France has often looked quite unstable. And the same was true in the 30s. And the French, nevertheless, often pulled themselves together. But at the moment, experts on France, and I count myself not one, would say it's sort of ungovernable. They seem to be unable to produce a government that can do things that every sensible Frenchman, of whom there are, of course, a vast number, knows have to be done. Well, without France, there is no Europe. I mean, it's simply reality, just as that without Germany, there's no Europe, even more so. But without those two countries, there's no Europe. So France is obviously very, very worrying. But I hope that after Macron's term, and I liked him, though he made many mistakes, they produce a president who is not a lunatic, who recognizes the reality of current politics, which is simply pragmatism, and the French sort of invented this raison d'etat view, going back to Richelieu and Louis XIV. So I have to hope they will do so again.
At the end, may I ask you also the question, maybe it's more like a philosophical question, but still, if you had to design an economic manifesto for Gen Z, which of course they would actually read and act on, what would be maybe the main principle to start with?
That is a wonderful question. I tried to answer that question in my book, and I'm not sure I had a satisfactory answer. I mean, first of all, I think I would say you can't have an economic strategy without politics. And we can't have civilized politics if you don't focus more on what we all share than what divides us. Once you've got close to a civil war situation in which people on both sides simply cannot speak to one another, and when you see the sort of violence we're now seeing in America, it's sort of really difficult to govern sensibly at all. And the second point on the politics I make is these populists are offering poison in the guise of medicine. And we've got very good research, wonderful recent research from some German scholars on just how damaging right-wing populism tends to be. Then they have to focus on the essentials. Unfortunately, we are going to have to stabilize public finances. I think that will mean cutting spending. And from the Gen Z point of view, a lot of that is going to have to fall on the old. And reluctantly, so it's not them, it's their parents and grandparents, but they should recognize it's in their interests that public finance is balanced so that everything is devoured by the current and reasonably soon old. A fundamental rebalancing. They need encouragement to work. And I think the sort of idea of a policy being devoted to what this recent book by Ezra Klein and Thompson called Abundance puts forward is pretty sensible. Focus on things that can make us all better off and give more opportunities. And if there are more opportunities, of course, the young will benefit most. By definition, the old have had their opportunities. So there has to be a rebalancing of our economic policy in favor of the young, and they must recognize finally that in that context, this will have to include being open to the world. We can't survive entirely on our own. It's profoundly against our interests and above all against their interests, because they will live with the ruined world that will be the consequence. So that very broadly is what I would say to a young person trying to think about sensible economic policy for the future.
That's very good. Thank you, Martin, for your insights. I'm a great fan of your commentary, and I'm looking forward to your next day's edition of your book. So thank you very much for being with us.
Unfortunately, at the moment, it looks very depressing, but it will say this is a real crisis, but we must rise to it. We must, otherwise we are sacrificing everything we've achieved over centuries.
I hope you found this interesting and useful, what Martin revealed us in the interview. For me, to be honest, the most worrying theme is France. I really don't want to see France becoming another United States with populist lunatics at the wheel. This May, I had a chance to talk to JP Morgan analysts here in Europe, and they all admitted to be afraid of, guess what? The growing global debt. Doubt can spread quickly, and if countries start to distrust each other, the end of capitalism can come much sooner than we think. After a roundtable discussion of Baltic economists, we'll go to Tallinn, where the attorney, a co-author and partner of Evershed Sutherland Bittans, the legal firm, Mr. Agris Bittans, will talk to Kristina Janušauskaite about AI and intellectual property.
Thank you, Kristaps. Yes, indeed, I'm joining from Tallinn. Here we have a IFPI 14th Baltic Conference. Usually we're discussing about topic issues related intellectual property, and this year is not an exception. And also I'm happy that today with me on this communication joined Kristina Janušauskaite. She is IFPI Director at European Legal Affairs, and we will discuss about generative AI influence or impact of copyright, and also about musical industry. Are they afraid or not from regarding this new technological breakthrough in the market?
But now let's come back to Riga. I'll tell you something about my plan. I have an idea to organize a gathering of Baltic economists, one from each country, once in a quarter, to discuss current state of economics and synchronize the regional picture of where we are and where we are going with inflation, public spending, taxes, and so on. And as I have a habit to turning my ideas in reality, here it is. Well, hello to everyone. In this very first quarterly round table of Baltic economists, I'm very honored to have a distinguished panel of experts today, starting from the senior economist at Swedbank Lithuania, Ms. Greta Ilikite. Hello.
Hi.
Chief economist at SEB Estonia, Mr. Michael Nestor. And later we'll be joined also by chief economist at Bank Citadel in Latvia, Mr. Kārlis Purgailis. Welcome to you all. So the format of this roundtable is very simple. We give the floor to each economist for, let's say, uninterrupted 3 to 4 minutes, and then we jump to questions, to comments, some observations as well. So I think we may start with Lithuania, because I know that Lithuania has a new government. There's a
widespread tax discussion, workforce discussion, rising wages, 4-day work week, and release of the second pension pillar next year. So in that context of the inflation, of course, Greta, the mic is yours, as to say.
Yes, thank you for the introduction. And I completely agree that we have a lot of news coming every day, and we have a new government which has been formed quite recently. But before coming into details, I just wanted to emphasize that Lithuania's economy is quite exceptional, not only on the Baltic level, but also on the whole European level. Lithuania's GDP grew by almost 3% last year compared to much slower average growth in the Eurozone and the European Union. This year, again, we expect the GDP growth will be close to 3% and much higher growth than in Estonia and Latvia. So it's kind of like, we are a bit an exception compared to the other Baltic neighbors and also other European countries. So we have a really good base right now. We do have strong household consumption. We do have strong manufacturing. We do have quite high wage growth. But next year, we expect these tendencies to be even boosted more by the second pension pillar reform. So the same as in Estonia in 2021, Lithuania's government decided to allow people to withdraw their money from the second pension pillar reform. And we expect that around 3 billion of euros will be withdrawn from the second pension pillar and will be spent by households. So definitely inflation and GDP growth will be boosted next year. And after this big party next year, we all love big parties. In 2027, we expect a hangover, but the worst thing is that the biggest hangover will be felt in the long run, because when it comes to population growth, when it comes to working age population growth, we don't have good tendencies to allow people to actually just stop saving for their retirement. So on the one hand, we do have really great tendencies when it comes to Lithuania's economy right now. On the other hand, I think that these reforms, when it comes to allowing people to withdraw their savings, are really short-sighted and will make a lot of damage in the long run.
Yeah. How would you characterize what's on the table of this new government? I hear a lot about taxes. Is that a big issue?
So the funny thing is that the new government, at least officially, said that they're not going to make any new taxes, not implement any new taxes, but at the same time, they're still talking about new taxes, for example, for banks. As you may know, we do have bank solidarity tax, which has been in place from the last government, and it is coming to an end in 2026. The tax should not be applied anymore, but new government is still talking about maybe some new taxes for banks, but we're not sure about this. They're also talking about Ignitis, our electricity provider, national provider, which has been listed in the market. So, I mean, we do have some strange suggestions, which I'm not sure if we do have time to discuss.
Do people think also that this is strange, or they think that it is brave?
When it comes to Ignitis?
Yeah, like to everything, like a four-day work week, for example.
Yeah, 4-day week also, it was a really strange discussion. It appeared from nowhere. So our new prime minister said that we should have 4-day work week instead of 5-day work week. But I mean, so we do have some strange, maybe at some point brave suggestions, but I feel that we need more discussions on a broader public level to just make sure we understand what we're talking about and what we are suggesting.
That's right. Colleagues, do you have any comments or maybe questions?
Well, I think it's just good to hear that Lithuania has been doing so great in recent years that they can allow themselves to have a shorter working week now.
Yeah, that's one thing. And what Mikael, you went through this with a pension, with a second pension pillar and releasing money to the public. So what are your words of wisdom to Lithuania about this one?
Prepare. Actually, from the economists' point of view, of course, I wouldn't like to see that Estonia has been the inspiration for Lithuania in that sense. But as said, at least here in Estonia by politicians now, the people have their freedom to do their investments themselves. And at least in case of Estonia, they were, just lining up in supermarkets, buying new TV sets, new lawnmowers, renovating their kitchens and so on. So they finally got the freedom and invested where they really like to put the money. In a sense, it was as already Greta actually explained, is that what happened and what will most probably happen in Lithuania is that we had really a huge party in shops. Many companies were seeing the best results over the years, but now after that there was a hangover, and still the situation hasn't changed that much.
Nonetheless, we can congratulate Lithuania on very smart decisions before, and now you are in a completely different cycle as two other countries, as you mentioned, Greta. So, Mikael, we turn to you and to situation in Estonia. Yes, fire away.
Well, there are very few things to be proud of, but things are improving. So it seems that our recession has ended, but the pace of growth that has followed has been not what many were expecting for. So very low figures. But in a sense, as an economist, I'm happy because almost every economic indicator I regularly watch, they're improving. But I think it's true that many people are accustomed of having a very, very quick growth. So hoping for like a 4 to 5% GDP growth, I'm not too sure that it will ever happen here again. So the closer you get to the ceiling, the more difficult it gets. What we are also expecting is that I already told some words about the retail sector and the domestic consumption, but what we're actually hoping for is more demand in the Nordic countries, because what makes maybe Estonia very different from Lithuania. So we have roughly the same share of trade in our GDP, but when for Lithuania the main markets tend to be Poland and Germany, so Estonians do most of the trade with the Nordic countries. So Sweden, Finland, Denmark, and Norway, they comprise roughly 40% of the goods trade. And having those interest rates we had, and knowing that those countries have one of the highest indebtedness levels of the private sector in the world, then of course they were hit hard, and they still feel it, because especially the Nordic construction markets, I'm not exaggerating when I'm saying that nothing is happening there. So when you look at the number of sales of apartments, you look at the construction volumes or the new building permits, so in every country almost they are at their historic low. So never ever has there been so low figures. And just looking at what was in that trade that the Estonians did within Nordics, was that in case of Sweden, for instance, I would say that roughly half or even more of that trade was somehow related to the real estate market. So be it the prefabricated buildings or doors or windows or furniture and so on. So everybody are expecting that things will turn to be better in the Nordics. I have a promise from my Swedish colleagues that the next year the Swedish households will start to spend more, but that will take time to really see that in Estonia's trade figures. And maybe adding on the domestic economy. So what I really envy of in Lithuanians is that the optimism. So in Lithuania, in consumer surveys, so most people are happy with their current situation and say that things will be even better in the next year. In Estonia, things, according to, again, those surveys are awful and will be even worse in the next year. And I'm a big believer in this behavioral economics, and the narratives that are being told right now in the economy of Estonia, they do not, make people to make positive decisions, to invest in their business or make big purchases.
Yeah, unfortunately. And what I say to my friends, if you want to really catch a shock, you need to go into a supermarket in Tallinn and go to food section and look at the prices. Look at the prices. So do you have any comment on that?
Well, that happens when the food prices in the global market go up, and then you find it clever to increase the VAT tax twice in a row and have the highest taxation of consumption almost everywhere in the OECD countries.
Yeah, that's logic. That's just logic. Any comments about the situation in Estonia? How you see it from your perspective, Greta, Carlos?
Well, I agree on the government policies and government's additional taxes and fees, that it's kind of the recession in Estonia was made worse than it should have been. And I think for other Baltic states, it should be as a lesson that when times are hard, you should not make it even harder.
Yeah, our government's official economic policy for 30 years has been that we do it pro-cyclically. So when things are bad, then we increase the taxes. When things are good, then we decrease them. And so it goes.
Yes. Carlos, your comment.
Yeah, well, for Latvia, Estonia is second largest partner for exports, and we definitely feel the pain you are struggling through. And yeah, it was a bit of kind of shock that your government took the decisions they did, and yeah, hopefully. Not only the bad decisions are copied in terms of second pillar, I hope that in terms of taxes won't be copied to our state as well.
But as I have heard, then at least you have these release of car taxes. Yes.
Oh, that is the hottest topic in Estonia. I think the main reason why the consumer confidence is low, because the basic human right of every Estonian man is his car, and taxing it, this is the biggest crime a government could commit. And well, now before the elections, it's funny to see the discussions that some of the parties that were explaining to the public that why having a car tax is good are now retracting and saying that we should abolish it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mikael. Carlos, your turn.
So yeah, I would say that Latvia is somewhere in the middle between exceptional Lithuania and then struggling Estonia. We've been doing a bit better than Estonia recent several quarters, but the good thing is that the last second quarter of this year was positive for Latvia. GDP rose by 1.7%. We were anticipating that this positive movement will start in the beginning of the year and would be fueled by internal consumption. But unfortunately, due to the geopolitical and tariff uncertainties, we didn't see this internal consumption building up. Therefore, the first quarter was still slightly negative for us. But yeah, in second quarter, both the confidence of consumers and then the real sales in retail has finally started to tick up, and yeah, retail sales increased by 1.7% in July, year on year. And yeah, hopefully this sentiment will stay here. Yeah, on the other hand, the wages are increasing still very rapidly, similar to Lithuania, and actually the purchasing power is I would say all-time high at the moment for Latvian people, but they do not hurry to spend the money. Vice versa, they are building the savings, and unfortunately, those savings are made only as a cash balances with the banks, on-demand balances, and yeah, the deposits with banks have grown by 8% year on year last 12 months, which says that people are still cautious, and there is a potential for internal consumption to grow quite rapidly in the upcoming periods, and yeah, I hope that this will play out for us as a support for the economical growth during further quarters, upcoming quarters. On the other hand, yeah, the manufacturing is growing quite substantially. It was 4.9% in 7 months compared to last year's 7 months. Yeah, exports are a bit growing. Lithuania is our largest partner for exports, and we feel that the traction from their good economical cycle. But I would say, fortunately for all three countries, the tariff worries didn't play out as we might have seen, and this won't be kind of a risk that we will face materializing in upcoming months. So
Okay.
things are getting better.
Yes, I want you to elaborate a little bit on the wage question, because in Lithuania I see that, for example, the investors like Rheinmetall is coming in. They are looking for people, for employees with a higher wage level. I haven't seen something like that in Latvia, but how would you explain the growing wage phenomena?
Is that a question for me?
No,
Or?
it's for Carlos. It's for
Okay.
Carlos. Yes.
So sorry, I thought it's for on
I just
Lithuania,
gave an
but
example, Lithuania as an example, because I understand where the wage growth could come in
okay,
Lithuania,
I got it.
but I haven't seen something like that in Latvia.
What we have seen that actually last 2 years, the higher wage growth was in the public sector rather than in private sector, and even though that last year's budget implied that for public sector there will be cap of for wage growth at 2%, we didn't see it capping out or materializing in the beginning of this year. On the other hand, the private sector was more moderate growing in 2023 and 24, but it's a bit accelerating now in 25, and so in total the average wage growth still continues to be a bit above 8%, which is actually unsustainable both for the public budget and for the enterprises to sustain in the longer run. So this is something we expect to be cooling down, but still it's a huge systemic risk for Latvia, because employment market and demographics do not play in favor of stopping this quite fast wage growth pace.
And now, as promised, we are traveling to Tallinn, Estonia, to meet Agris and Kristina and hear a conversation about artificial intelligence and its impact on music industry and intellectual property in much broader sense.
We represent 8,000 members. Some of them you know, such as Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, Warner Music Group. So we do have indeed a lot of work in the context of the issues related to generative AI and copyright. There's been already a debate ongoing at the EU level, but also at national level. So I'm happy to speak very briefly about some challenges and maybe some opportunities that both are represented by AI. So on the EU-related issues, I will certainly mention the EU AI Act, which was, in our view, the world class leading regulation in relation to generative AI, because it introduced the first in the world GPI related obligations in relation to copyright compliance, and also the transparency, the disclosure regarding the data that has been used in the context of the training of Gen AI models. And this is something that is crucial to the industry, and I would say right holders community at large. At the moment, we are, as the industry and the rest of our colleagues in that community, very much focused on the implementation of this regulation. And in particular, we are looking forward to see how the transparency template that is supposed to enable rights holders to exercise and enforce rights in the context of generative AI will be applied. And this is obviously a lot of work that also goes from our side into that debate and the conversation. So in terms or in parallel to this process, I would obviously mention the general copyright issues that are also being discussed at EU level. And we do have some pending initiatives at EU level, such as the European Parliament Jury Committee own initiative report on copyright and generative AI that would also look at the issues just beyond the, let's say, the AI Act related transparency. Then we also have issues in relation to personality rights that go beyond the copyright law as such, which are also crucial, in particular to the artist community. And obviously, we're looking how to make things work, practically speaking. So basically asking ourselves the question, do we have enough tools to help our industry and other rights holders to enforce and exercise their rights meaningfully and effectively? So enforcement measures and so on and so forth. So this is a little bit on the legal side of things. And obviously AI, speaking generally, also poses a lot of societal issues, moral questions, questions of competition, on human factor and the copyright regulation at large, I would say. What is copyright protected content? Does the generative AI created output protectable under the copyright rules? Looking at this from the current perspective, as the law stands today, obviously copyright protects human authorship, original human creation. And I think this is, for now, is the answer. The copyright legislation in many aspects, also looking historically, has been flexible enough to allow, at one hand, the creation, right, the protection of human creation and in all forms and shapes. And at the same time, it has been built in such a way to allow also technological development. So although obviously generative AI brings in a lot of new aspects, I think copyright law as it stands today is still a good framework to navigate within and to benefit from both sides.
Thank you, Agris, for this very in-depth conversation. I hope the AI won't kill the video star as once video attempted to kill the radio star. We finished today's Median Report episode with an interview which may turn at one point into a masterclass. We all know that international press is not very keen to write about our region, our businesses and innovation. Whose fault is it? Aren't we able to tell our stories? Or they don't want to listen? I'll talk with Julija Gifford, partner and CEO of Truesix agency. Julija, thank you for joining MedianReport. I'm very happy that you found time in your calendar.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about some serious issues. I have a habit to read international press and prepare some press reviews, and what I don't really find in those pages is companies from Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And I really wanted to ask, despite the strong innovation and growth stories that we have here in local press in the Baltics, why do we have so few of our companies making in international business press?
Well, I think you're totally right. And I absolutely agree that it's not because of a lack of talent. I think that a lot of the times it comes from a lack of confidence that we have a place on the global stage. And if I had my say, then I would encourage all of the Latvian, Baltic, and European countries to believe that they do have a place in it, because they absolutely do. And we all are contributing interesting and unique products to the world, and it would be a shame for the world not to find out about it. Now, I think that a lot of companies wait for the media outlets to find them, but that's actually not how it works. Companies have to make those journalists and those media outlets aware of them, because otherwise, how are they supposed to know who to approach? So taking the time to be proactive, to reach out, is the best way to even inform these media outlets that there is something interesting to cover. And that's important work that has to be done in order to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, but what I have noticed in several companies that they have these local PR strategies, but they're not having international PR strategies.
Yeah, and that's a funny phenomenon, because, well, depending on the company and the country that that company is based in, and depending, of course, on the niche, it's very possible that that country's target audience size isn't big enough for that company to meaningfully scale. And of course, it is meaningful to have local PR and visibility, especially for hiring efforts, for employer branding, reputation, etc. But if you're looking at growing a product meaningfully and scaling it beyond your own small country's audience, then you're going to have to go internationally. And one doesn't have to exclude the other. A lot of the times they can work in tandem, but one message that will be relevant for your local market absolutely isn't the same message that will be relevant for an international audience. So it's very important to have both, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. There's one hypothesis that I want to test with you. How about global media outlets are not interested in the Baltic region?
Well, that is a tricky question, because I can't deny the fact that there is a certain amount of bias towards location. At the same time, a good story will cut through regardless. And it comes down to finding that right story and finding the right journalist or the right media outlet, and bringing them together and making that interesting. So there are a few ways that we've found success with this. One of those approaches that we use is to create unique information, unique data that no other company can have. You know, you can be the coolest, most well-funded company in Silicon Valley, but you're not going to have the same data that we have. And so then we can extract some data that we have, some observations about buyer behavior, whatever that might be, then put that together in a press release and send it out. And there's no one in the world who can compete with that. So that's one tactic. But of course, we have to take advantage of every opportunity. And so
like,
then,
for example, geopolitics at the
like, for
moment.
example, geopolitics, yeah. If we're doing anything to support Ukraine, that's a great way, a great approach to take. Right now, a lot of the stories are around defense tech. The Baltics are very strong in defense tech because no one knows better than the Baltics, what the stakes are. So this is something that can absolutely be played on and offered to global media outlets. Founder experiences, personality, etc., at a global scale, that's also something that no other founder can replicate because that's something unique to you.
Yes. You at Truesix, what kind of practical steps do you give to your clients for Baltic companies and institutions to break through the noise and everything in the international press?
Yeah, so one thing is to be aware of what's going on globally. And the hardest part in all of this is creating those connections and seeing those connections with what your product is doing with what might be going on in the world. So maybe your product has something that you can relate to the rise of Taylor Swift, or
Yes.
maybe your product, if it was used by Trump, he'd be a lot happier of a dude, or whatever that might be. So trying to find those global topics and figuring out how your product can squeeze into that narrative, and then that kind of gives you your Trojan horse into getting into that global discussion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yeah. I think that the creativity is probably one of the key points for this kind of marketing and this kind of PR, and maybe not there's lack of resource for companies to dedicate it to so much. Isn't it true as well?
Well, of course, but it also depends on the company.
Yeah,
There are some
of course.
companies, if they don't believe that communication is a priority, they will never find the resources, and then it is what it is. At the same time, there are other people who are very capable at managing it in-house. There can be dedicated comms people, or they can be marketing people, or they can be the founders themselves who see those opportunities. And it doesn't have to be a huge effort all the time. There are a few easy ways to passively scan for publicity opportunities. For example, one thing that we do on a daily basis is we scan through a variety of platforms where journalists proactively say which stories they're looking for and what kind of comments they're looking for. So a journalist will often know that they're writing a story about
energy,
and they need an example of a startup that's doing something interesting with energy and AI or whatever. And there are hundreds of these kinds of requests over a day. And what we do is we scroll through them. And if something is relevant for one of our clients, we say, hey, this is an option. We can quickly provide a comment. So if you are working at a company that doesn't have a ton of resources to devote to big PR campaigns, the one thing you can do is just dedicate 10 minutes at the beginning of your day or in the middle of your day or after lunchtime to scroll through these. So one place is Twitter or X, using the hashtag #JournoRequest and then going through there. The same hashtag also is more increasingly used in LinkedIn. There are also various email-based services like Help a Reporter Out or Help a B2B Writer Out, which is more people who are writing about B2B
niche stories.
So then, that's like very relevant if you're in the B2B area as well. So there are a few of these, and then that's one way that in an in-house capacity you can easily stay on top of opportunities without having to devote a ton of time. One thing I will add that you do have to be quick.
Next week, we'll be reporting from Vilnius, from the Baltic Brand Forum, where everyone related to marketing and advertising is very welcome to visit. And of course, you will see my reporting from Nordic Business Forum in Helsinki, where MedianReport will meet CEOs of Baltic and Nordic companies. Tune us in next Friday. We'll talk.
Don't forget to subscribe. And if you have already subscribed, join Median Premium Package for only $2.99 a month for exclusive content and full-length interviews. Find us also on Spotify and all the best podcasting platforms. Thank you for comments, shares, and likes. We appreciate them a lot. This has been a production by Standout.